I have the number 13 up here on the stage. What does that bring to your mind? What was that? Luck. And I'm thinking I have bad luck. I'm the last speaker for the day. How am I going to keep you guys engaged, right? No, actually 13 just turned out to be the year-over-year difference in the percentage of companies that now say that they will actually calculate business impact against HR programs. If you look at the human capital reports by Deloitte for 2016, they actually have that data in there. 13% increase, i.e. 51% of the companies actually are saying that they will measure business impact against HR programs. If you look at our CLO magazine that came out last, there's an article in there about why talk about ROI and why talk about business impact. And when you look at that, you see that there are 51% of CLOs that are committed to calculating ROI. And I believe that today 26% do. So think about the increment we're looking at with the focus, the sharp, razor-sharp focus with which learning is looking at how do you tie learning and development strategy to business goals, right? So when I put that title together, I thought, blah, how boring. But suddenly it's not boring. So I thought, okay, I'll get up here on stage and I'll talk to you guys about this and I'll tell you my story, but most of you don't know me. I'm fairly new to learning. I've been in learning, technically I've been in academia for many years, but to the corporate learning environment, I'm 3 years old. So I'm just a toddler. I could learn many things from many of you. And then I said to myself, okay, and now I'm going to go up on stage and tell them I work for Ericsson. How many of you in the room know who Ericsson is? That's a lot more hands than I saw a few years ago, right? So would anybody care to volunteer and tell me what Ericsson does? They make electronics, okay? Another hand? I'm sorry? Telecom infrastructure. Any other engineering background people in the room that care to explain that? So I asked Mike and Mimi when I got to the table, I said, how many people are in this conference room? Because I thought I was doing a smaller session with like 20 to 30 people. And then my friend Rachel turned to me and said, Kuntal, you're in the big room. I said, oh. But anyway, I landed on my 2 feet. So let me take you for 1 second and show you a quick 1-minute video to give you a better idea of what Ericsson is, who they are, and why they're an important company as we look at how the world is transforming due to the technical revolution. Now I'll ask the question, how many of you thought of Ericsson being a player in all of those amazing, inspiring moments you saw in that video? Anybody? And that's a business challenge Ericsson has, right? We're a telecom infrastructure provider. If you think about it, we've been in the business of connectivity. We're 140 years old this month. April 1st, Lars Magnusson actually founded Ericsson based out of Sweden. 140 years old. Think about the type of transformation this company has had to make. We're in over 180 countries. We have over 116,000 employees globally. Let me put it this way. Right now, out of the 300 plus people that we have here, if 120 of us, our phones just crash, how would you feel? 40% of all mobile traffic travels through Ericsson networks. So when you look at this, and you look at a company like this, and you say, okay, they're an engineering company, they provide boxes, and you're right, they work, they climb towers, they do all these types of things that make communications possible. So how do we take learning at the next level there? So this is where I wanted to come and tell you the story. And now the story will be more meaningful for you. And I have about 8 minutes, otherwise Mike's going to run me off the stage. So I'm going to tell you my story in 8 minutes. I've had a pretty long career. I've been a working woman for 20 plus years. And I would say that I had a pivotal moment back in 2013, where I had a colleague of mine come to me and say, Kuntal, I'd just become head of learning for North America. I joined learning from the business side. I actually met Rachel at a conference, Macy conference, and said to her, I know nothing about learning, but I took this role, and I'm trying to do something innovative and creative. So my colleague came to me and said, and she represented one of the largest part of the organization. So if I were to slice Ericsson into its business chunks, it was the largest part of the business within North America, and said, you need to give us this training, and it needs to happen in the next 2 months. And by the way, you need to train a whole bunch of people. So I turned to myself and I said, why? Why in 2 months? And why 10,000 people? I was told, because you must. The executive wants to know. He wants it. You have to deliver it. So of course I started my journey, and I looked at myself and I said, oh boy, I knew that this was a larger part of the business. I knew if her boss wants this, my skin's in the game now. I'm probably going to get fired if I can't deliver what I'm supposed to. But I couldn't understand this urgency of wanting to train 10,000 people. So I did what my consulting background taught me to do, is I asked the question, why? Right? I went directly. I did what any consultant would do. I went to the stakeholder who supposedly was asking for this claim, and I said, help me understand the urgency, and why do you need to train 10,000 employees? And by the way, I looked at the employee base. There were a mixture of full-time employees and contract employees. They were mobile. They were spread all over North America. And by the way, within 6 to 12 months, they wanted to see business results. So I must have had this conversation with this executive. I probably had 5, 6 meetings trying to get inside his head to understand, what is he seeing here? I don't understand. It's just going to be too expensive. And how do you ensure that experience? If any of you were in the virtual reality session, and I apologize because I forget the gentleman's name, but he talked about how experience is really the king of everything. Because once you experience something, you can retain that knowledge, especially if it has an effect on you. So what I learned from these sessions with the executive is that really the business transformation within this organization wasn't understood. A lot of these engineers were working on projects, they were working on the boxes and delivering the same things that they do without really understanding the long-term strategy message of the organization and how that impacted their lives. So we did what we could. I was, like I said, at that point about 5 months old in learning. I had an organization that had 3 employees, and I needed to train 10,000 people So I started doing, again, what a good consultant would do. I tried to look around to see who could potentially have this expertise. And I leveraged my contacts in the business. I leveraged some other learning professionals that I just reached out to on LinkedIn and said, hey, can we connect? Can we talk? Right? And I connected with them. And really, once I understood the business need was this. Ericsson's business is transforming. They need to be able to continue showing their value to the customer, because the boxes that they build tomorrow will be software. The software that they build can be beat up by some other competitor, because we compete now against the likes of Google and the large ICT players. So when we saw all of this, we really pulled together a really good core team. And what we did right is we actually said, if these employees were going to actually show the customer value, how are they going to impact the business? And that's where the senior executive really came through for us. And this is why I think it's really important to align learning strategy to business goals. And he said to me this simple thing. He said, Kuntal, if I have 10,000 employees, and I know they're my feet on the ground at my customer sites, and a small percentage of them can actually change their behaviors from the training that we create, think about the bottom line impact that we're going to have. And ta-da, being a math brain, that just made perfect sense to me, and I said, we've got to do this. But how do we do this? We had an LMS that only was open to employees, but not the contractors. The business model with which this business was executing was a combination of the two. Well, there comes the cloud. Everybody's talking about cloud these days, right? I looked to see if I could find a vendor that had a cloud that could work with our IT infrastructure. That required me to partner strongly with our head of IT within Ericsson, because now I'm looking at North America, and you know what? The rules from an HR perspective in Canada and the US are very different. And so in order to be able to execute on this, it really required a core team to come together, and the entire project was always managed by learning and development. And at the core, we always talked about what is that capability that we want them to have, and what does that look like? What does that experience look like? So when we talked about the experience, you saw I shared with you guys the type of target audience it was. We had to create something that was also device agnostic. And this required really from front to back. The bottom line of this story is, how did this happen? How did learning and development strategy? I mean, I was no rocket science. I came in and I was just trying to solve a problem, and I'm a problem solver, and that's what I did. But the compelling story to share with you guys, as we're looking at the future of learning, and we're talking about how companies want to measure business impact against HR programs, and we want to look at what is the return on investment, and we want to make evidence-based decisions. Well, we really need to have true alignment. And so in my story, the true alignment came together where the executive stakeholder being able to go back and drill in and engaging that stakeholder to really get behind their head in what they thought success looked like was really critical. Partnering with the HR business partner was very, very important, because we had to convince them that an ILT, or instructor-led training, was not the right way to go. That if you wanted that consistent experience and you wanted everybody to learn exactly the same way, you actually needed e-learning. You couldn't do it with a physical instructor, because today I may come up as an instructor and teach you the same concept very differently than he may or she may. So pulling all of that together required also stretching my learning consultants, because they were no longer just waiting for the business to come and tell us what to do. They had to work on trying to look at what's out there in the market that is really cutting edge and that can actually be a true learning solution. And as I said, throughout this process, we kept the employee in mind, front to back. So hopefully you've enjoyed my story. I think I've summarized for you the why we did it, the how we did it, and what we got out of it. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have during the Q&A session. So thank you.